an English copy of Mayor's Roy-Laroche's speech available for you, for those who need it. C'est la période de questions. Now it's our question period. Par respect pour les membres de la coalition à notre table, je vais vous demander de bien vouloir vous identifier en tant que média et également de dire à qui s'adresse la question. In respect for our coalition members, don't forget to say from which media you're from and to whom you are asking your question. Les invités seront disponibles pour des entrevues individuelles à la fin. Our speakers will be available for one-on-one interviews after the question period. Monsieur Tendresse.
Merci. Charles Tendresse avec TVA. Two questions. One for you, Mrs. Darch, une pour vous, Madame Am. For you, Mrs. Darch, I just want to know, I would like to, because I haven't heard you before, what was your reaction when you saw what was happening in Lac-Mégantic in July? And you were probably conscious of the danger, but was it the start of your decision of getting involved in having a tighter security around freight trains like this? And ma question pour vous, Madame Ham, avez-vous le sentiment que du côté, on est un peu à la remorque du processus législatif américain? Si les Américains finissent par resserrer les normes sécuritaires, du coup, le Canada va emboîter le pas, d'où la raison d'être ici plus actif. Merci.
Okay. Actually, there was an accident in Illinois in 2009, and it was an ethanol train, a CN ethanol train that derailed not far from where we live, and a huge fire that burned for a couple of days, and a woman stopped in her minivan at the crossing, was burned to death, basically trying to get out of her car. That accident report came out in 2012, and our National Transportation Safety Board in that report talked about the failures of this DOT 111 tank car used to transport ethanol and crude and other hazmat, and need for better emergency communication. So that got us involved. Within 6 weeks of that report, we filed a request with our Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration in Washington, asking for a rulemaking following what the railroads were doing, asking for a new standard for those cars. We were asking for all existing cars, which are 2/3 of our fleet, and I believe 80% of the Canadian fleet, to be retrofitted to be crash-worthy. And so we filed that in April of 2012, and it basically sat without action until Lac-Mégantic in July of 2013. When I heard about the Lac-Mégantic accident, I thought, we have an expression there, but for the grace of God, that it could be my town, and how horrible and tragic to see those pictures of the fire. Visiting it, of course, in December reinforced the horrible tragedy that it was, and we really felt that perhaps that could have been less catastrophic had some action been taken on the tank car action before then, but that clearly this was an area that needed attention, and it made our efforts become that much more engaged. So we've continued, and then we're happy to join our fellow mayors to fight for more rail safety. Thank you.
Alors, pour répondre à votre question, la réponse est simple. Non, on ne se sent pas à la remorque, mais je vais expliquer un petit peu plus, parce que je pense pendant ces 2 jours, et mes collègues sont certainement d'accord avec moi, là, on a été témoins d'un dialogue en continu entre les 2 gouvernements à tous les paliers. On a été aussi renforcés dans notre démarche de continuer la communication au niveau municipal, puis de garder les liens de communication en continu. On sait que la législation des 2 côtés de la frontière, ça va être lourd à changer, pour des raisons différentes, mais ça va être lourd à changer des 2 côtés de la frontière. Mais on est convaincus maintenant qu'on peut être proactif, puis un paquet de petits pas qu'on peut faire régulièrement d'ici à ce que la législation soit changée pour assurer la sécurité. Donc, on n'est pas à la remorque, au contraire, puis il y a une très grande volonté qui a été exprimée clairement, autant au niveau du département du transport que de l'ambassade, d'harmoniser les règlements des 2 côtés de la frontière en tenant compte, évidemment, des territoires et des spécificités de chaque territoire.
With CBC. In terms of the .111s, it seems to me that there's widespread agreement that they need to be phased out, particularly the older ones, the pre-2011 models. Do you have a timeline, though, because there's some disagreement over how soon they should be phased out, and are you asking for a certain timeline when you're meeting with both American, I guess, and later Canadian officials on this?
Well, I think we think sooner rather than later, and as we're saying today with what we've learned about the volatility of Bakken crude and this temperature issue as we head into summer, it becomes an increasing concern. We're frustrated because the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, who is doing the rulemaking on the .111, has put out a schedule or a calendar that has them coming out with a proposed rule in November of this year and no final rule sooner than January of 2015. So we would like the rule to come out sooner because individual private companies are taking action on their own. In terms of a phase-out time, again, the sooner that the pre-2011s can be out of service, and in fact, the 2011 standard may need to be improved as well. So that is an important issue to us.
Hi, Bill Marsden from Post Media News. Karen, this question is for you, and it concerns liability. What has been the corporate response to your demands for a recognition of their liability, et cetera? And what are, in fact, your demands in that area?
Well, the question of liability, as you saw in Lac Megantic, there's perhaps $2 billion or so worth of damage and reconstruction that has to be done, and the railroad went bankrupt. So the question of who should bear liability for these tragedies, the railroads don't own the tank cars for the most part, so involving everyone in the chain of the supply chain, from the producers of oil to the tank car owners to the railroad, is the issue. And what we're saying is the issue needs to be addressed, looked at by Congress. Railroads, the large railroads, can only get about $1.5 billion worth of insurance, commercial liability insurance. So if you have an accident of this proportion again, how do you, cover all of those damages? Does there need to be, and this is something that we've learned about from the nuclear industry, sort of a fund above and beyond the insurance capability of the various parties? And is that a fund that all people in the chain, the railroads, the tank car owners, the producers, should be a part of, so that if there is a tragedy, and we'd like to prevent them first, there is a large enough money that it doesn't become a burden on the taxpayers. So that's what we're exploring. We haven't had a particular reaction from any industry yet on that point, but that's something that needs to be looked at and followed.
What about lawmakers?
Again, we haven't had large or long discussions on that. One of the congressional offices was able to provide to us a paper that had been done for the rail industry, just some background information following this, with this nuclear idea. At that time, though, they were thinking that the big area of exposure were the toxic inhalants and other waste like that. I don't think at that point, a couple of years ago when this was done, they were even considering the possibility of crude or ethanol being the big tragedies potentially.
I'm Joyce Napier, Radio-Canada. I have the same question, but I'll ask it in English. You are going to Congress this afternoon. Who will you meet and what are you hoping to accomplish? Et je vous poserai la même question, Madame Roy-Laroche. Vous allez au Congrès cet après-midi. Qui allez-vous rencontrer et qu'est-ce que vous espérez accomplir?
I'll start, and then we're having what is known as a congressional briefing this afternoon in the Rayburn Building. We will have a meeting room, and we will have we will be present there and have our materials there. And we've basically invited through the offices of Congressman Michaud from Maine. They've sent out a letter to all of the other congressional offices asking their staff or the congressman to come through and understand the issue. And then later in the afternoon, we'll be meeting with Congressman Michaud from Maine himself to speak with him.
Vous souhaitez que je vous réponde? Oui. Bien, le message que nous allons réitérer C'est toujours le même message que nous transportons depuis, je vous dirais, depuis la catastrophe de lac Mégantic, la révision et le renforcement de la réglementation ferroviaire, l'application de ces règles et aussi les inspections fréquentes qui doivent être faites pour s'assurer que cette réglementation soit bien appliquée. En fait, la tragédie de lac Mégantic a révélé que plusieurs règlements n'étaient pas assez sévères par rapport au type de matière transportée et aussi par rapport à l'entretien des voies ferrées, par rapport aussi à la rigueur dans les opérations. Alors, c'est un ensemble de facteurs qui ont fait qu'à lac Mégantic, nous avons vécu la pire catastrophe. Et ce que nous voulons rappeler, c'est qu'il est urgent, il est vraiment urgent, avant qu'une autre catastrophe se produise, que l'on fasse une révision en profondeur de la réglementation et qu'on soit en mesure de l'appliquer le plus rapidement possible.
Prochaine question.
Hi, Jessica Murphy, Sun News. Just someone from Canada, I suppose, and from the United States. In terms of the response from lawmakers, what is it a good response? Do they seem eager to help, and do they seem ready to push for action?
I'll start. Okay. Yeah. Well, with the agency, the secretary that we met with yesterday, and those, the FRA and PHMSA and Department of Transportation, they were very receptive to what we had to say, and I think they are showing urgency around the issue. The congressmen and the senators have had hearings in the last couple of weeks on Capitol Hill and have talked to panels of folks in the industry, PHMSA, the railroads, the petroleum people. Many of them have asked questions that are showing a sense of urgency around these issues. Congressmen from Oregon and Washington, state of Washington, as well as North Dakota and Maine, of course. So there is definitely an interest at New York as well, places that are crossed by a lot of rail and are seeing much of this traffic. And so we hope with our presence, with all of us, to be able to further that interest today and to have them look at these additional issues, but look at the more pressing ones of the safe transport right now as we head into summer.
I would say on the Canada side, we had a very quick response from the minister, Mrs. Wright. It was fast. We met with her in a very short delay. We asked for inspections of the railway. It was done rapidly. So I think we all agree that it is a priority. It is urgent. And like I said before, because it's going to be long to change all the legislation, there are some things that have to be done quicker, and we feel that it's the first time in history, anyway, I feel that we're sitting down, and these are federal laws, and the municipalities are taking in consideration, and we're sitting down with the government. So it's a very an open dialogue, definitely.
Can I just follow up to that question really quickly, Karen? Your organization had asked to testify at these congressional hearings. You didn't. Can you tell us why?
We were not on the panel for either. I'm not sure. I think that the issue of local government involvement and the importance of local government, as all emergencies are local, and we are the ones dealing with these issues on a day-to-day basis, is important, and that's one of the issues that we're emphasizing as we have spoken both with the Canadian officials and yesterday with the Department of Transportation officials, and I think again today we'll make that point with Congress, that there is a perspective at the local level that's very important in these issues.
Well, why was
Sorry, Blake Subject with EnergyWire. Thanks for taking questions here. I had a question on the information sharing front. I was wondering, the railway industry will say that they'll provide hazardous materials information to bona fide first responders, but that's a category that does not include mayors or local elected officials. I'm wondering what kind of information do you want? Do you want, specific volumes? Do you want, just a general idea of what's passing through? And when you get that information, what do you do with it? Are you potentially going to do what Mayor Rahm Emanuel has suggested and maybe institute a tax to fund emergency response capabilities? What are some of the plans on the information sharing front? Thank you.
We definitely, that's a good question, because that's one thing that we've been discussing a lot in Quebec. We definitely need all the information we can get so that the first responders know exactly what they're dealing with, which is not what's happening right now. And when I say we, it doesn't have to be the whole council, and the person responsible of security has to know what's going through our communities when it's going through, not a report a year after. And it has to be as much detail as possible so that we know what we're dealing with. And one thing that really we had already realized, but yesterday in our meetings it was confirmed, is that we really didn't know exactly what we were dealing with before what happened in Lac-Mégantic. Now we know what we're dealing with, and we have to be more well prepared, definitely.
De la presse, question for Madame Ham and Madame Darche. I understand that regulation action is needed, but I'm not sure I understand what kind of legislative action you're expected from the Congress, if any.
Okay. Currently, the action for the tank cars and their standards is a regulatory action, so that is in that process. Some things that would be congressional action, potentially this question of liability, if there were to be any sort of fund set up, that type of thing, that would be a congressional action in our minds. Also, this question of infrastructure investment for the smaller railroads, that the RIF fund that may be accessed for that. If there were to be a change in the rules to make that easier for the smaller short-line railroads to access, that would probably take some congressional action as well. So those would be two congressional asks. But in terms of non-legislative, the Congress controls the budget and has, I think, the ability to emphasize to the agencies the importance of quick action, and so I think that's an important piece of leveraging that. And I just want to follow up on Mayor Ham's comment on the emergency response. One of the things, in terms of knowing what's going through, one of the things that we've asked for and have pressed for is, in the event of an emergency, having a very quick electronic information get to the first responders of what is on the train that they're responding to, rather than the paper consist that the current rules require that they have in one engine that could be 2 miles down the road because the trains are long, that there be electronic information getting to the railroads within, or to the 911, the response centers, rapidly after an accident. And at the congressional hearing, the American Association of Railroads, that represents the largest railroads, indicated that that might be possible by the middle of this year. So another question would be on the smaller railroads that are operating through our communities, how quickly that they would be on board with having that information available to responders. So just adding that, sorry.
I think you've had a complete answer there, but I would also refer you to the action plan that the union has adopted for railroad safety, because there is legislation, but there is a whole action plan for prevention and then when something happens and after, because right now we're dealing with the emergency, which is preventing it. But there's a whole lot of things that have to be changed also in all the other steps. So I'll refer you to the action plan, but the answer was complete, yes.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Quick reminder, our speakers are available for one-on-one interviews. Donc, ceux qui voudraient avoir des entrevues individuelles, nos membres, nos maires sont disponibles pour vous. Merci.